So we're still going to be doing inverse trig functions today. Today we're going to be focusing on tangent and cotangent. So I want to remember real quick, all 6 of our trig ratios on the unit circle, okay? So remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, but on the unit circle, that's y over r, and since the radius is just 1, it ends up just being the y value, okay? And then cosine just goes with the x value. And tangent is y over x. Adjust this just slightly. Okay? So that should all be kind of a review for you guys, right? And then the reciprocal trig functions. We have sine, it goes with cosecant. And that's going to be 1 over the y value. And then cotangent is x over y. So just to kind of give you guys a heads up, we already talked about sine and cosine inverse, okay? Today we're going to be looking at tangent and cotangent, all right? And the inverses of those two. I don't believe we're going to do inverses for secant and cosecant. I'll check on that, but right now I think we're just going to focus on tangent and cotangent and their inverses. So, just like with sine and cosine, tangent, remember the input is an angle, right? And then the output is the ratio that I get when I divide the y and the x. So when I'm doing inverses, it's going to go the opposite direction, right? I'm going to be given the ratio, and my answer will be the angle, okay? These are maybe a little bit more tricky because I have to actually divide those two values. So what I want to do, let's go ahead and, if you still have this where you can reference it easy in your notes, you can just look at it, or if you want to draw a new one, either is fine. But I'm going to sketch a unit circle up here so that I can reference it.
I thought you can reference it from your head.
I can, but it's not very, I can't quite point at an imaginary thought bubble. Okay, so those are my values in quadrant 1, right? I've got all the x values and the y values there. What I am going to go ahead and write down, and if you guys want to write this down too, I think it's helpful. For cotangent and tangent, since it's the y divided by the x, let's go ahead and work those out so we can see kind of what answers we get with certain values. Okay, does that make sense? Like, I'm going to go ahead and just at each angle, you can just write this out to the side. If I do y divided by x, how do I divide a fraction?
Multiply by the reciprocal.
Okay, so I'm going to put times 2 over the square root of 3. And since I get a radical on the denominator, I would have to rationalize that. Do you guys remember how to do that?
Multiply top by
Multiply by the square root.
Yeah, so I multiply both top and bottom by the square root of 3. And I end up with square root of 3 over 3. Okay. Then let's go to our next angle. So at pi over 4, square root of 2 over 2, divided by square root of 2 over 2. And I'm actually just going to leave the division sign on this one because I think it's pretty obvious. Anything divided by itself is just 1.
1.
Okay. And then for the last one here, again, I'm doing y divided by x. So square root of 3 over 2 divided by a half. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. And I get just square root of 3. Is everybody all right with that so far? I'm just dividing, the y divided by the x. And this should be good for cotangent as well, because even if I'm doing x divided by y, I'm still going to end up with the same values, right? So this will help us, I just have to figure out what angle these are going to go with, okay? So when I start looking at things like tangent inverse of, say, square root of 3 over 3, okay. So the way I kind of think about this, I'm looking for at what angle is tangent this. And so if I know, hey, I got square root of 3 over 3 from taking 1/2 divided by square root of 3 over 2, right? So since tangent is y divided by x, I know the y value has to be 1/2, right? Okay, so what angle does that have to be?
Pi over 6.
Yeah, pi over 6. Then same thing for cotangent. I'll just erase this. Oh, let's do cotangent inverse of square root of 3 over 3 as well. Okay. So I know that cotangent is the ratio of x over y. Okay, so I'm looking for, where is cotangent this? I know that comes from taking 1/2 divided by square root of 3 over 2. Okay, but now since this is cotangent, this first value has to be the x value. Okay. So where is the x value 1/2?
Pi over 3.
Yeah, it has to be right here, pi over 3. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So the next thing I want to look at, those were all positive values, right? Quadrant 1. Okay, that's easy. When we get to negative values, again, we have to look at where do we restrict the domain. Because for all of our trig functions, there's going to be multiple spots where we could get those answers. So I'm going to put this back up here. You don't have to write this down. Hopefully we know where all of our signs are at. Since tangent is y divided by x, it gets restricted just like sine from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. So I'm going to write that down next. For tangent, we restrict the domain from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. Okay? That's where tangent's going to be 1 to 1. We'll talk more about that later when we get to the graphing. But if I want positive values for tangent, I'm going to be in quadrant 1. And if I want negative values, then I'm going to be down here in quadrant 4. Okay? And I'm, again, restricted from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. So if I have an angle down here, it's the negative angle, not like 11 pi over 6. Okay? And then for cotangent, just like cosine, the domain gets restricted from 0 to pi. So again, that's like the top half of the unit circle here in quadrants 1 and negative values in quadrant 2. Okay. So we're going to go through some examples here, and I think really the most difficult part here is going to be when we have negative values. So let's start with tangent inverse of negative 1. Okay. So my answer's got to be an angle. Where? So first off, where is tangent negative? What quadrant? Hmm.
2, 4.
No. 4.
Yeah, 4, right? So my angle is going to be negative. And then if I want it to be negative 1, where do I get, where's y divided by x, negative 1?
Negative pi over 4.
Yeah, pi over 4, because that's where they're both square root of 2 over 2, right? Okay, so my answer is negative pi over 4. Let's see, in the earlier examples, we already did what, tangent inverse of square root of 3 over 3?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do tangent inverse of negative square root of 3. Okay, so if I look back at where we did all that division at the beginning, I know that I get square root of 3 from taking square root of 3 over 2 divided by a half, right? It's going to be the exact same thing, that, even though it's negative. So I want that y value to be negative square root of 3 over 2, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so what angle would that have to be?
Negative pi over 3.
Negative pi over 3, right? Okay. Let's do one more here before we move on. I'm out of room here, so I'm going to have you guys go through this one. But what would tangent inverse of 0 be? So where would y divided by x be 0?
Did you say that one?
Sure.
Oh, either pi or pi over 2. I can't tell you which one though.
Pi over negative pi over 2.
That was gonna be my first guess.
I was gonna say 2 pi.
2 pi. That was gonna be my second guess.
Okay, so you're correct with pi or 2 pi, but those are all outside of the interval that we're restricted to. Okay, so I want from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2, and you're telling me pi or 2 pi. So 2 pi is,
0.
okay, yeah, it's just 0.
0 equals 0.
But not always. For tangent it does.
For tangent.
All right, let's move on to cotangent now. So this is what, example 4?
Yep.
And previously I did what? Cotangent inverse of square root of 3 over 3 as well? Okay, so let's do cotangent inverse of just square root of 3. We'll start with a positive value. So again, remember cotangent is x divided by y. Okay? So to get square root of 3, what do I have? I have to have what divided by what?
Square root of 3 over 2 divided by half.
Okay, so I need the x value to be square root of 3 over 2, right? Okay, so that angle will be
5 over 6.
pi over 6. Okay, good deal. All right, now when we start doing negative values, again, just for cotangent, remember that I have to go over here to quadrant 2, right? Because it's 0 to pi, so my positive values are here, my negative values are over here. Okay, so let's do cotangent inverse of, let's just do negative square root of 3. So because this is the exact same answer, just negative, I know that I need to have negative square root of 3 over 2 divided by half, right? Does that make sense? So I know over here I need the x value to be negative square root of 3 over 2. So what angle would that be?
5 pi over 6.
Okay. Yep, 5 pi over 6. Let's do one more here. And then I think we'll move on. Okay, so cotangent inverse of negative square root of 3 over 3.